Story 1: The Shadow in the Corner. I've had sleep paralysis a few times before, but this one night was different, way worse. It was last winter, and I just started a new job, so I was super stressed. I remember going to bed that night feeling uneasy, but I just figured it was the new job nerves. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up, but I couldn't move. I've been through this before, so I knew I was in sleep paralysis. Usually, I just waited out, but this time something felt wrong. There was this heavy, suffocating feeling in the room, like the air was thick with dread. I tried to stay calm, but then I noticed something in the corner of my room. At first, it was just a dark shape, almost like a shadow, but it felt like it was watching me. My heart was racing, and I could feel the panic rising. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, but then it moved. It didn't walk or float, it just kind of shifted closer, like it was sliding along the wall. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. My body was frozen in place, and all I could do was watch as this shadow figure inched closer. It had no face, no features, just this dark, hollow shape that seemed to suck the warmth out of the room. As it got closer, the fear became overwhelming. I felt like it was going to reach out and touch me, or worse, take me somewhere I didn't want to go. I don't know how long this went on, but it felt like hours. Finally, with a massive effort, I managed to jerk my body awake, and the shadow was gone. I turned on every light in my room and didn't go back to sleep that night. The scariest part is that I don't know if it was just a hallucination from the sleep paralysis or if there was actually something in my room. I haven't seen the shadow since, but I'm terrified it's just waiting to come back. Story 2: The Whispering Voice. It happened a few months ago, but I still get chills thinking about it. I've never been one to believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but this experience shook me to my core. It was a regular night. I'd watched some TV, brushed my teeth, and crawled into bed. Nothing out of the ordinary. I don't remember falling asleep, but I do remember waking up suddenly. My eyes were wide open, and I could see my room clearly, but I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis, it's happened to me a couple of times, so I wasn't too freaked out at first. Usually, I just ride it out and try to focus on calming thoughts until I can move again. But this time, something was different. The room felt off. It was too quiet, and the shadows seemed deeper, more menacing. Then I heard it, a whisper, so faint that at first, I thought I was imagining it. It was a voice, definitely not mine, and it was right next to my ear. At first, I couldn't make out what it was saying, but then it became clearer, repeating the same words over and over, "You're not alone." My heart started pounding, and I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. The voice kept whispering, getting more insistent, more threatening. I could feel something, or someone, behind me, leaning in close, like they were about to touch me. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to scream or move. The voice grew louder, almost angry, as it repeated, "You're not alone, you're not alone." Finally, with every ounce of strength I had, I managed to move my arm. The second I did, the voice stopped, and the room returned to normal. I bolted upright in bed, gasping for breath, and immediately turned on the lights. There was no one there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. To this day, I still don't know if it was just my mind playing tricks on me, or if something or someone was really in my room that night. But I'll never forget that voice and the terror it brought with it. Story 3: The Man with No Face. This is something that still haunts me, even though it happened years ago. I was in college at the time, living in a crappy off-campus apartment with a couple of friends. It was late, probably around 2 or 3 a.m., and I'd just fallen asleep after a long night of studying. I woke up suddenly, feeling that familiar pressure on my chest. I knew right away that I was in sleep paralysis, but this time it felt more intense than usual. I couldn't move a muscle, and my room felt colder than normal. I tried to calm myself down, but then I saw him. Standing at the foot of my bed was a man, or at least, it looked like a man. He was tall, dressed in all black, but the most terrifying part was that he had no face. Just smooth, featureless skin where his eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. He didn't move, didn't make a sound, he just stood there, staring at me with that blank, horrifying face. I was frozen with fear, my mind racing with thoughts of what he was going to do. Was he going to hurt me? Drag me out of bed? I couldn't even scream, couldn't call out for help. All I could do was lie there, helpless, as this faceless figure loomed over me. It felt like an eternity, but eventually, I was able to move again. The second I could, I bolted upright, and the man was gone. I turned on every light in the apartment, waking up my roommates in the process. They thought I was crazy, but I swear to this day that he was real. That faceless man still shows up in my nightmares, and I'm always terrified that one day he won't disappear when I wake up. Story 4: The Old Woman in the Hallway. I've never been a great sleeper, but I never expected anything like this to happen to me. It was a regular weeknight, and I went to bed like I always do, scrolling through my phone until I drifted off. I must have fallen asleep pretty quickly because the next thing I knew, I was awake, but I couldn't move. At first, I thought I was just in a weird half-asleep state, but then I realized I was in full-blown sleep paralysis. I'd read about it online, so I knew what was happening, but knowing didn't make it any less terrifying. My bedroom was pitch black, and I could feel a heavy presence in the room. I tried to focus on breathing and staying calm, but then I heard something. It was a soft shuffling sound, like someone dragging their feet down the hallway outside my room. My heart started racing, and I strained my ears, trying to figure out what it was. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. An old woman, hunched over, with long, stringy gray hair and tattered clothes. She was standing in the doorway, just staring at me. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, and her mouth was twisted into this awful, toothless grin. I couldn't move, couldn't look away as she slowly started to shuffle closer. Her feet dragged against the floor, making this horrible scraping sound. She didn't say anything, just kept grinning at me with that twisted smile as she came closer and closer. By the time she reached the foot of my bed, I was on the verge of a full-blown panic attack. I was sure she was going to climb into bed with me, or worse. But just as she reached out a gnarled hand toward me, I finally broke free of the paralysis. I shot up in bed, gasping for breath, and she was gone. I didn't sleep for days after that, terrified that she might come back. Even now, I still leave a light on in the hallway, just in case. I've never seen her again, but the memory of that night still sends chills down my spine. Story 5: The Crawling Figure. I've had sleep paralysis on and off for years, but what happened last month was beyond anything I've ever experienced. I've never been a fan of sleeping in complete darkness, so I usually keep a small lamp on by my bed. That night, I remember falling asleep with the dim light casting soft shadows across my room. I woke up suddenly, completely paralyzed. My body felt like it was being weighed down by something heavy, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't move. I've been through this enough times to know the drill: stay calm, focus on breathing, and wait it out. But this time, something was different. The shadows in my room seemed to shift, like they were alive. That's when I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, something was moving on the floor. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized it wasn't just a shadow. It was a figure, low to the ground, slowly crawling toward my bed. It looked human, but its movements were all wrong, jerky, unnatural, like it didn't know how to use its limbs properly. I couldn't make out its face, but I could hear it breathing, this horrible, raspy sound that sent chills down my spine. The closer it got, the more intense the feeling of dread became. My mind was racing, screaming at my body to move, but I was frozen in place. I couldn't even close my eyes to block out the sight of this thing crawling toward me. It reached the foot of my bed, and I could feel the mattress dip slightly under its weight. The sound of its ragged breathing was louder now, almost like it was right next to my ear. I thought for sure it was going to climb into bed with me, but instead, it stopped. I could feel it hovering just inches away from my feet, like it was waiting for something. The terror was so intense that I could barely breathe. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the paralysis broke. I shot up in bed, panting and drenched in sweat. The figure was gone, and my room was silent again, but the fear lingered. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, too afraid that if I closed my eyes, I'd see it again. I've had sleep paralysis since then, but I've never seen that crawling figure again. Still, every time I feel that familiar heaviness pressing down on me, I can't help but wonder if it's lurking somewhere in the darkness, just waiting for the right moment to come back. Story 6: The Screaming Woman. I've always considered myself a rational person, not easily spooked, but what happened a few weeks ago has left me questioning everything. It was a Friday night, and I'd gone to bed after a long week of work. I remember falling asleep quickly, completely exhausted, but it wasn't long before I found myself awake again, unable to move. I knew right away I was in sleep paralysis. It's happened a few times before. But this time, there was something else, something I'd never experienced before. The room felt oppressive, like the air was thick with something malevolent. And then I heard it, a woman screaming. At first, I thought it was coming from outside, maybe someone in the street. But then I realized the sound was coming from inside my room. It was a gut-wrenching scream, full of pain and terror, and it was getting louder, closer. I tried to move, to turn my head, but I was completely paralyzed. The screaming grew louder until it felt like it was right next to me. I could feel the vibrations in my chest, the sheer force of it, as if the sound itself was going to rip me apart. My heart was pounding in my ears, and I could barely think through the fear. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. There was a woman standing at the foot of my bed, but she wasn't like anyone I'd ever seen. Her hair was wild, her clothes tattered, and her face, oh God, her face was twisted in agony. Her mouth was wide open, but the scream didn't match her lips. It was like the sound was coming from somewhere else, somewhere deep inside her. She started moving toward me, slowly at first, but then faster, as if she was being pulled by some invisible force. The closer she got, the more intense the screaming became, until it was all I could hear. It was like the sound was drilling into my skull, and I thought I was going to go insane. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the paralysis broke. I jerked upright in bed, gasping for air, and the room was silent again. The woman was gone, but the echo of her scream still lingered in my ears. I've tried to convince myself it was just a hallucination, a trick of my mind, but I can't shake the feeling that it was something more. I've had nightmares about that screaming woman almost every night since, and I can't help but wonder if she's waiting for me to slip into sleep paralysis again, ready to finish what she started.